Dear boomers, what if before any major decision that you make, that you consult the person that will be one day you, lying on their deathbed, that person looking over their lives. If you could ask that person lying on their deathbed, whatever age, for advice on a major decision, it's not a bad idea, because that's a long, usually it's a long-term vision of your life. Or, as Gene Houston says, this whole idea of the deathbed scenario is Matthew Dix, and Gene Houston says that what we should do is look to our inner child for advice on any major decision that we make. So we have Gene Diction with the inner child, and we have Matt Dix talking about the long-term vision of our lives, asking our deathbed person what they would do in a situation. I know I have to tell this story. I have been considering retirement for years. I was not necessarily ecstatic about the workplace, punching a time clock. Meeting the negativity in the workplace was very difficult to overcome. The negativity in the workplace has always been there. Sometimes it would be kind of funny to make fun of the scenarios that we were confronting. But after 40 years, it gets a little old. I'll never forget one of our housekeepers at one of the hospitals I worked at. And I was a nurse for 40 years. I've mentioned that a lot. This woman was a housekeeper, and she felt pretty good when she wasn't working, and she was getting older, and she was thinking about retirement. The minute that she would walk into the hospital, her body went into deep pain. She could barely walk, and she was suffering throughout a 12-hour shift, and she would have to sit down. I loved to give massages to my staff at the time, and I would give her a lot of massages. And finally I said, maybe your body's trying to tell you something. I never forgot this, because years later, that's what I had to tell myself. So she did retire, and the pain completely went away. As for myself, I, as just mentioned, had wanted to retire for years. And it was not what I thought was possible. Well, of course it's possible. Anything is possible. But what was happening with me is I started, the last 6 months of my last job, I started to get these migraine headaches with vomiting. And I started to vomit and have tremendous pain during my last shifts of my last job. The job where I had to punch a time clock, the job where I had to watch nurses and doctors fight it out, and the job where there would be doctors actually running away from terrible situations that they were there to save people's lives, and they just didn't show up. So that was not good. I retired at the end of 2023, and the headaches went away. I think I'm still recovering from these night shift scenarios, and I still get an occasional headache, but nothing like it was. So this is a story to illustrate listening to your body. Now, if I were listening to an older version of myself on my or her deathbed, I would have retired a long time ago. I didn't listen. Also, had I consulted my younger child, my younger inner child, she would have definitely have told me to not quit, but retire. And all the years of my life, I've always been more or less of a childlike person, and I would have loved to have exited the workplace long, long, long before, and my body was telling me to. And we have to listen to our body. Matt Dix talks a lot about different concepts of storytelling. And he talks about ask yourself what is the most important thing that happened at the end of each day. So, this is a 5-minute exercise at best. And we, at the end of the day, instead of watching television or watching the news, we sit down for this 5-minute period and think about the most important thing that we think happened every day. It is like a review of your day kind of thing, but he talks about it in terms of creating a scenario of storytelling. What is not only the most important thing that happened that day, but how can I turn it into a story? And you do this day in and you do it day out, and a story emerges. I mean, we all have many, many stories, but we as Matt Dix talks about, we don't use it in general when we meet somebody on the street. We don't use storytelling when we go for job interviews, although I had learned to do that. That's how I got a number of jobs, by telling a few stories that would be amusing, or I hoped would be amusing. And so, and also the act of the interview itself turned into a great story whereby I would seek out the person who was to hire me. And these people were not easy to find. They never answered any of my phone calls. The one woman in particular that I remember, she was elusive, and I knew that she worked at the main hospital. I was trying to procure a job at a satellite in part of the Hill system. I stood at a street corner and I watched the people go by, in and out, whatever. And then I saw a woman come towards me. She wasn't coming towards me in any way, but she was coming towards me across the street, and I stopped her. I said, "Are you such and such and so and so?" Because she had the vibe that she was. And she said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "I've been trying to reach you, and I have been trying to get a job as a labor and delivery nurse 3 or 4 miles away. Can I speak with you right now about getting the job?" And so we went into her office, and I practiced what I usually practice when I'm trying to get a job. And I think I mentioned it yesterday, the unconditional loving field, where you create a loving field around the situation. And I moved energy, and I was pretty quickly hired for the position of a labor and delivery nurse. It wasn't the easiest job in the world, because I had just come from being a nurse practitioner for 14, 15 years, and they were cutting funding to part of my job, which was in pediatrics. So anyway, it was in a role thing. So these nurses, even the head of the department, where I eventually got that job, they were very cruel to me because I was a nurse practitioner and just becoming just a nurse, which is a very pathetic way of looking at our profession. I think nurses have a poor self-image, and that's what I learned from that experience. So now that I'm retired and I can look back over these situations, I'm so grateful for not having to go punch the ungodly time clock that is dehumanizing, in my opinion. But I'm telling a story about something that need not be that way, but I viewed it that way. And I was boxing myself tighter and tighter into situations that were not liberating by the story I told myself. But stories can be liberating, is what Matt Dix teaches. We can tell stories that foster the imagination. Actually, telling stories helps to release oxytocin and endorphins, and creates a situation where you don't that you remember the story that the person is telling you, far above if they show you a chart or they get logical or they decide that, you know, they decide that, you know, that you have to abide by the rules and blah, blah, blah. But if you tell stories and you tell them in a way that it's heartful and loving, you'll get that job. Don't forget to come and look at my latest video over here. Bye.